exaggeration to say that Shame Legacy was a profound disappointment for me. This was a game I had been looking forward to for a while, with an intriguing premise and an aesthetic which evoked other recent games I was very fond of. Unfortunately, it's found lacking in almost every area, and despite its short runtime, it absolutely dragged out as I persevered towards an abrupt, anticlimactic and wholly unsatisfying ending. I'll start off by thanking Fairyship Games for providing me with a code to play this game. I really did have hope for this game, as on paper it's right up my street. Right there in the game's online description, it's a first-person survival horror game, and of course survival horror is what I'm all about. The late 19th century aesthetics rendered in Unreal Engine 4 also reminded me of Made of Scare, and the promise of pursuit by a powerful monstrous entity made me think of the one that hounds you throughout Phobia San Divna Hotel. Both of these are excellent first-person survival horror games, if you've not played them, and if you have, then you know what level my expectations were at. But despite calling itself such, Shame Legacy is not a survival horror game. There's no non-linear exploration through a relatively open setting here, and instead you follow a path so rigidly linear that your character can't traverse ankle or knee-high obstacles, with no risk of having to backtrack through that area later on. The linearity of a game isn't in itself a bad thing, but in this game it largely reduces gameplay to blundering between a series of very rigid stealth and chase set pieces, interspersed with the occasional puzzle. There are puzzles, which is technically one tick in the survival horror definition list, but these never tax your brain for more than a few moments if there's any complexity to them at all, and most of the time they involve carrying key items from where you find them to where they go. And as part of this, there's no inventory management, as there's no inventory, items you pick up having a single use that you come upon fairly quickly. And there's no combat to speak of, instead only a simplistic stealth system that veers between too easy and frustrating enough to make you grind your teeth, especially as the game's panic system evolves, and a self-defense mechanic built around a poorly designed minigame and a recharge mechanic that renders it all but useless when faced with multiple enemies. Initially, your character is unarmed, and so the only thing you can do is hide from the villagers. That's pretty easy to do, paying mind to the noise generated by your movements as indicated by a HUD in the bottom left of the screen. But if you do get spotted, for example because you didn't realise that your character couldn't step over a small and easily surmountable clump of rocks, there's no real possibility of escape unless you're really close to a door or a checkpoint. The obvious limitations of the enemy AI work only because that inadvertently reduces the frustration of enemies who are immediately in your face, with them grabbing you meaning instant death, meaning the stealth system demands either perfection or cheesing between checkpoints, with no room for any kind of narrow escapes or anything to make stealth more fun. Once you get a staff and the game announces that you can defend yourself, you might think that you're past this. But instead, all this means is that if you get grabbed, you have a chance to play a weird QTE minigame in order to get away. Not only does this do nothing more than stun the enemies for a few seconds, it's single use. Your useless character immediately has a panic attack, meaning that until you find some anti-panic attack potion, you not only have to put up with their loud, pitiable shuddering, but the next time you're spotted, you're dead. To make matters worse, you can use these potions when you see them, but you absolutely cannot collect them for later use. And of course, you cannot do stealth kills or knockouts. To add to all of this, eventually you're introduced to victims of your enemies, who have been crucified. Their cries attract attention, of course, which would be a fairly interesting mechanic in a stealth system that wasn't already broken. But it hardly matters, as being in the presence of those cries gives your character a panic attack, and worse than just removing your one limited janky self-defense option, it actually spawns a monster who insta-kills you. This is a truly bizarre choice, with no plot justification, that adds to the frustration factor that utterly sucks the fun out of the game. Speaking of the monster, he will chase you at points, and honestly the main thing this does is give you a break from the stealth. There are a lot of intriguing ideas in the game's mechanics, but all of them are poorly executed on their own and pile on top of each other to create a mess. As a horror game, what atmosphere was built up by an intriguing premise, visuals and soundscape is stripped away by the frustration of playing the thing, and all within a story which feels unfinished, more like an outline yet to be fleshed out, that ends leaving nearly all questions unanswered, and not in a good way, like Signalis, which leaves plenty open to interpretation, but more like the writers forgot to resolve so much of the plot. Your character's backstory is half finished, and what we do get evokes no emotion. The monster has no explanation or any real connection with anything else, nor does the state of the villagers. Their appearance hints at some supernatural intervention, though it's not certain as your character is absurdly weak to begin with, and the priest who pops up from time to time is just there, just because. And at the end, there's no resolution to any of this, no purpose to the narrative that finally becomes clear. It just stops, and that's kind of it. To top it all off, there's absolutely no accessibility built into the game. No controller remapping, no customization for the subtitles, no closed captions, No permanent reticle for motion sickness, nothing at all. It's probably also worth mentioning that, in terms of performance, I did have the game crash on me at one point. There were also instances of repeated dialogue bugs, and every restart comes with a long load time. Not the end of the world, but still not a point in the game's favour. From the initial trailers, I was rooting for Shame Legacy. I wanted it to continue in the recent tradition of really good, enjoyable indie survival horrors. But its main selling point isn't true, since it's not a survival horror game, and what we're left with is a handful of interesting concepts and ideas, both narratively and mechanically, that unfortunately fail to land, giving me perhaps the most frustrating and fruitless gaming experience that I've had this year. It really is a shame. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this game are. Have I got it wrong, or do you agree with my take? If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like and consider subscribing to keep up to date with all my content. Like the video that just popped up, which YouTube thinks you should watch next. This is a Patreon and member supported channel, so if you want to become a member and unlock custom badges and emojis, early access to my videos, and your name in the credits, then click the join button below. Thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.